about subordinator. What is subordinator? Subordinator is a conjunction that connects an independent clause to a dependent clause. Independent clause is a main clause, whereas dependent clause is an additional explanation that is embedded to dependent clause. And also the difference between them is that independent clause contains a complete thought, whereas dependent clause doesn't. In this video, I will explain to you about the subordinators if not and unless. They basically both mean the same. If not means unless, and unless means if not. What is the difference? Well, we can see the difference by looking at the examples here. Joan will stay home if the weather is not nice. Joan will stay home unless the weather is nice. Okay, so what is notice the difference between them is that unless you don't have to put not. No, you don't have to. But when it comes to if, you have to put not. So it would be like Joan will stay home if the weather is not nice. Joan will stay home unless the weather is nice. You don't have to put not after is or after all the to be forms. And that's all.
The next I will tell you about because and although. Because and although are conjunction, but both of them are different. Because introduces a fact or explain to support the idea of the clause. Because is used to state a fact. For example, she goes to Japan because she gets a job. Because here are fact, it expresses a fact. And although introduces states a fact, a contrary fact, or an argument against the idea of the main clause. Also, although is used to state a contrast. For example, although the movie had a bad ending, I enjoy it. Although follow the main clause.
I will continue the explanation about subordinator, which are even though and even if. Even though expresses about a fact, something that's true or real. For example, even though John is rich, he lives in small house. That means John is really rich. And even that means when the speaker said John is rich, John is really rich at the time. And the second even if expresses unreal situation. For the example, even if I had time and money, I still wouldn't go on a cruise. That means when the speaker says I have time and money, this is the unreal situation. That means he doesn't have time and money at the time.
So, I will continue the explanation about subordinators, whether or not. Subordinators, whether or not, is similar in meaning with if, but words introduce condition. Whether or not introduce a condition or its opposite. We can use if or whether or not to report in direct yes/no question or question with or. So, when and how we use whether or not in the sentence, let's continue. First, when the clause is the subject of the sentence. For example, whether the car will be ready depends on the mechanic. So, the clause whether is the subject of the sentence. And the second is when it modifies a verb or not is needed. For example, I wear a raincoat whether or not it is raining. Two alternative ways we can also separate whether or not. For example, I wear a raincoat whether it is raining or not. And the third or the last is whether can be used after preposition. For example, my father and I were talking about whether the option of buying a new car is good or not. So, the word about is preposition followed by whether or not. That's all.
In this video, I will continue the explanation about the subordinators, which is subordinators whenever. Whenever it means every time or at any time. It's often used with the simple present tense. For example, the first is I go swimming whenever the weather is nice. It's the same when the speakers say I go swimming every time the weather is nice. The second is I read whenever I have time. It's the same when the speakers say I read at any time I have time.
In this video, I will continue the explanation about subordinator, which is subordinator because of. We know that because has two forms, because and because of. And we can see the difference between them at looking by. The difference is that because is followed by clause and because of is followed by noun phrase.
I will continue the explanation, which is about subordinator in spite of. So, in spite of have the same meaning too, although they express a contrast between two things, but they are different. The difference between them is we use in spite of. We use in spite of with noun phrase, and we use although with a clause. So, let's move to the example. Okay, here we have two different sentences. First, John didn't wear a raincoat although it was raining. Although is a subordinator and it is followed by clause. The second sentence is John didn't wear a raincoat in spite of the rain. In spite of is a subordinator and it is followed by noun phrase. And that's all. So the next is I'm going to talk about regardless of. What is regardless of? Regardless of is one of a conjunction and we can use it as a subordinator. And subordinator regardless of is preceded by noun phrase. Let's move to the example. So the example is first is I wear a raincoat whether or not the weather is nice, and the second is I wear a raincoat regardless of the weather. Actually, both of them has the same meaning, but the difference is whether or not followed by the clause, and regardless of is followed by noun phrase.